Hello everyone and welcome back to Wendy's Way. Today we are continuing our journey in food. I'm going to be working in the kitchen today. I bought a 40-pound case of boneless, skinless chicken breasts and I am going to be pressure canning them. I find that I get the greatest deals on meat when I buy in quantity. I go to my local meat counter at the Fairway grocery store and I asked the gentleman, what is the most affordable way for me to buy a volume of meat? At a good price, especially when I buy beef, it doesn't have to be a good quality beef or good cut because I'm going to be pressure canning it. And when you pressure can beef, all cuts taste the same, basically. So we're going to do this for economical value and for flavor, for ease of preparation when it comes to a meal. To me, canned meat is the ultimate fast food. Canned vegetables too. So in this first part, I'm just going to show you all the supplies and the tools that I'm going to use today. And then we'll get busy at it in the kitchen doing it Wendy's way. I thank you for joining me. Just for quick starters today, I'm going to show you my tools. You may not see my face during the whole thing, but that's quite all right, isn't it now? Okay. I always work with vinyl gloves, especially with meat, especially with chicken, but I wear them for everything, for dough, for peppers, things like that, onions, things with heat or stink or germs. It's just wonderful to use these gloves. We need salt. I use pink Himalayan. You can use any kind of salt you like. I have 2 butcher knives. And depending on the size of the chicken breasts will depend on which one I use. They are both products of Rada Cutlery. One in the brushed aluminum handle, one in the stainless steel resin handle. This one they call the stubby butcher, and this one they call the old-fashioned butcher knife. They both work amazingly well. Super sharp, super strong. And I will put links to where you can shop for those in Wendy's Way, Rada Kitchen Store. I also have quart jars. Typically we'll use a quart of meat at a time if we're cooking for 2 or 3 or more. That's a good volume for a pasta dish or a stir fry or a soup or anything like it. I like wide mouth quart jars. I only use the jars that are actually made for pressure canning. They're going to be Ball or Kerr or some brand name like that that are actually made for this specific purpose. Some people will use like mayonnaise jars, jelly jars and things like that for canning. I'm not so confident with that. When it comes to hot water bath, sure, I'll use an old jelly jar or something like that. But when it comes to pressure canning, I really want something that's made for the purpose. I don't want a jar that wasn't made for a pressure canner to explode in there and ruin everything that I've worked so hard to get. Okay, I'm going to use a funnel just to keep the lids as clean as possible. I have rings and flats made for the jars. I do not heat them. I do not sterilize them. I do clean the mouths of the jars. So salt, gloves, cutting board, butcher knives, mason jars, and funnel. Don't forget the coffee. Now I'm going to step back here. Okay, well, obviously I've got a counter full of Rada, but my canner is a Presto canner, and I love it. I've worked the beans out of it for the last couple of years. It's a canner with a pressure gauge, which to me instills more confidence and reliability that I'm doing it right. It has a flapper that, will hold up to build the pressure. It has a steam valve to let you know when it's coming up to pressure. It has a rubber plug over here, so if things go absolutely haywire, if you, have an emergency and you run away while it's still on, this pressure valve will blow before the canner does. It has a rubber gasket inside the lid, and every time I use the canner, I inspect the rubber gasket. I make sure it's still mobile. Within there, I make sure it's not worn or dry or cracked. I make sure my flapper's working. I make sure my gauge is secure. I look through the valve to make sure I can see light on the other side to ensure that the valve is open, and make sure my little plug is still secure. You can feel it moving in the hole, but it's meant to do that. And I also have a cover then, once we get a good amount of steam coming out of here, and I'll show you all this later, going through the steps, then I put the weight over the steam valve to help it build up pressure. All right. In my canner, I will put approximately a gallon of water. And that is, make some noise here. There's a mark on the inside of your canner, and there should be instructions with your canner when you purchase it about how much water is required. Each canner is probably a little bit different. For the size of mine, it's between 2 and 3 inches in the bottom, and that equates to a gallon of water. I also use white vinegar. The white vinegar, I will put a healthy splash in the canner, which, it equates to maybe half a cup, I'm guessing. And I also use it on a paper towel to clean the neck of the jar, the rim of the jar, before I put the lid on. So I put my vinegar in. Yep, that's a pretty good amount. Now, the reason for the white vinegar is to keep the jars clean after canning. If you do not put vinegar in your water after the food is canned and the jars have cooled, they will get white and cloudy. And I don't think it matters what quality of water you have. Here in my hometown, Clarksville, Iowa, we have excellent well water. The town has, a fantastic well, good quality water. It still makes the jars cloudy and white. That's just how it works in a pressure canner. One more tool that I'll be using before the process is through is my jar lifter. When they're done in the canner, I will grab them and lift them out. And you also need a towel, or something like a towel. One of those dish draining mats would work well, tea towel, hand towel, anything like it. Because when you pull those jars out of the canner, even though they've been sitting for a while and, the pressure has released, they are scalding hot. And they will continue to boil within the jar for a long, long time sitting on the countertop. You don't want to put a scalding hot jar on a cold surface. You want to put a little buffer between that hot jar and the surface that you're setting it on. And a towel just seems to be the easiest way to do that. I've thought of using a cooling rack, and you probably could, but you just don't have the balance. I really want a hard, flat surface to put that cushion on. So now that I've talked too much and I've walked you through all the tools I'm going to use, let's put our gloves on and get busy pressure canning some chicken. Okay, I'm ready if you are. I've got the chicken breasts out. I've got all my tools gathered. Let's dig in and get our hands dirty. We're gonna pressure can some boneless, skinless chicken breasts. Okay, like I said earlier, I bought a 40-pound case of boneless, skinless chicken breasts at my local Fairway grocery store. And they are butterflied breasts, and they have rib meat on them still. I think I got it for like $1.73 a pound, so I think I did all right. I'm not going to get hurt on this deal. You know, the only way I might be able to do it a little better is if I were able to raise my own. You know, that's a fight for another day. Asking city council whether or not I can raise meat chickens versus laying hens. Okay, I'm going to start with the stubby butcher knife because I think it's probably enough knife for chicken breasts. It may even be more than enough knife because this bad boy is amazing. The heavy duty, the old-fashioned butcher knife, I will probably save for the beef roasts, possibly. Or, you know, I'll just show you both knives as I work with the chicken today. Basically, you know, I'm going to cut off, you know, this is just blatant fat. You really don't need that because I think you'll be surprised at how much liquid the meat has in it and how moist it'll be once it has been pressure canned. I do not pre-cook anything that I can, meat or anything. I raw pack everything. And partly because it is really awesome and time saving, and partly because it just turns out really well and it saves me work and time. So, like I say, these are butterflied chicken breasts. They do still have rib meat on them. And, you know, that makes them more affordable. So, I'm just going to show you slicing a few here with my butcher knives. There's a little cartilage in there. Don't think we need that. These are things that the guys behind the meat counter would clean up before they offer them for sale on the meat counter. You know, this is just a case ready to go for them to prep for the meat counter. They just sell it to me as is at a discounted rate, which I think is pretty awesome. I like our local meat counter. I know raising your own is optimum. Getting to know a farmer in your area is an excellent thing. You know, anybody with any size farm that raises meat, it's always beneficial to shop local. You know what goes into it at that point, especially. We have an excellent butcher shop here in town and meat market. They make all kinds of homemade sausages and brats and cheeses, and wow, these folks have got it going on, I'm telling you. Okay, but basically what I do, you know, I cut it in reasonable chunks and I raw pack it in quart jars. I prefer quart jars because it's a good amount for us for a meal. What am I thinking? I prefer, I should say, wide mouth jars when it comes to meat. You know, small mouth jars you can use. You can probably even get 8 small mouth versus 7 wide mouth quarts in my canner at a time. But quite often, to pull the meat from the jar once it's canned, instead of pouring it out in the bigger chunks, you know, if I'm going to make a shred of barbecue or whatever, I'm going to take a big carving fork, shove it inside the meat and twist. you know, so I'm shredding the meat before I'm pulling it out of the jar, which is a really awesome thing to do, I think. So here I have my jar full. I'm filling it up, you know, to the line. Let me grab it. I'll just have to clean off the outside of the jar. I'm filling the jar. I'm trying to get as many air pockets out of it as I can, depending on the size of the chunks of meat too that you've made will make it easier to get air pockets out, you know, and I'm going to take it up to that bottom line. I'm going to fill all these jars. I am going to add a teaspoon of salt to a quart jar. I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of salt if I'm canning in a pint jar. Then I'm going to take my vinegar and I'm going to wash the rim just like this. Obviously on this one I need to wash the entire outside of the jar because I touched it with my dirty gloves. But just to show you, you just take your vinegar rag and you wash the rim. Okay, I'm going to finish filling these up and I'll be back with you. Okay, I got 7 quart jars filled with cut boneless, skinless chicken breasts. Now I need to remember to put 1 teaspoon of salt in each one. When you add salt before you cook, it simply works as a flavor enhancer. When you add it after you cook is when you actually taste the salt itself as a seasoning. I mean, I even add salt to the water when I am boiling oatmeal because it just acts as a flavor enhancer. I like my oatmeal sweet. We add raisins and all kinds of wonderful things to the oatmeal, but I always put salt in the water. And when you put it in the jar with the meat and it goes through the process of canning or cooking, it simply enhances the flavor of the chicken or the beef or the pork or whatever you are canning. I've put my lids on. I'm turning the ring until it stops, and then one more twist for finger tight on all 7 jars. And as you can see, my flats are new, obviously, out of the box because they should only be used to be sealed one time. Whereas the rings, this one doesn't want to go on straight. I have to go grab another one if this one is bent. The rings you can use over and over. They do not come in contact with the food. They only serve to hold the lid down on the jar while it's cooking. And if you are going to, there we go. If you're going to consume the entire jar in one meal, then after you have canned the jars and the meat is cooked and cooled, then you can remove the jar or the rings for storage. If you don't think you're going to consume the entire jar in one meal, then you should leave the ring on the jar so that after you use a portion of it, you can put it back on and put it in the refrigerator for next time. My rings are fighting me today. They're making me look ridiculous, but they are some old rings. All right, let's try it again. Always been told if it doesn't want to go forward, back it up until it falls. That didn't work. Yeah, always when you're filming that it wants to make you look inept, right? Well, that ring may not get used today. Okay, there we go. Good thing I brought an extra, right? Didn't know I did that. Okay, I have lids, rings, salt on 7 wide mouth quarts of boneless, skinless chicken, and I'm gonna throw it in the canner. As you can see, 7 wide mouth jars fill my canner, and it's steaming because I've had my water on low in the canner waiting for me to put in the jars. Now I'm going to seal the top down, turn it on to high, and wait for that steam valve to show me that it's hot enough. I'll be back shortly. I've placed the lid on the canner. I've turned the burner up to high, and the next step is waiting until I see a consistent large flow of steam coming from this valve. And even after I see it start to blow out a consistent amount of steam, I'm going to wait another 10 minutes before I put the weight on it and start to build up pressure. So I'll be back when we're ready to do that. Okay, I don't know how well you can see it on the video. I guess it is a little more sporadic than I thought. There we go. My little steam spout is starting to spew. And the one over here in front of me is spewing a bit too, so I'm going to set a timer, give myself, there it goes, give myself about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to come over and I'm going to throw the weight on the steam spout. We've completed the next step. Our steam spout blew very strong for about 10 minutes. I put the weight on over here, and then our pressure valve popped up, and now we keep a close eye on the gauge, and it will gradually rise until we hit 10 or 11 pounds, and then we'll turn the heat down and allow it to cook. I need to go check my book. I'm pretty sure it's 75 minutes at 11 pounds, but I'm going to go double check the book and I'll let you know in a little bit. Okay, my canner has now reached 11 pounds of pressure, which is what is required for our level above sea level. I'm going to set the timer for 90 minutes. I double checked my book, and it said boneless poultry in a quart jar. You need to pressure can at 11 pounds for 90 minutes. So I am going to turn the heat down, and you'll learn on your stove after you do it a while how far. All right, 90 minutes, but I will keep an eye on it. I will be out here, every 10-15 minutes just checking it out, because you have to adjust the heat sometimes. I've done this many times on this burner, and so I know pretty much where to put it on the heat dial. But when it gets close to the end, depending on how full the canner is, sometimes I do have to turn it down or even turn it off for a minute or two to get it to dial it back, because sometimes the pressure will spike. So I'll show you what we do when we get to the end of the 90 minutes. So we kept it at 11 pounds of pressure for 90 minutes. I had to turn it down a couple times, but then it maintained for the last 45 minutes. Dead on. Timer went off, I came out, and at this point all I do is shut the burner off. I can see that it's already dropping pressure gradually. Now it's another waiting game until the dial drops down to 0 pounds of pressure and my little pressure flap will drop. And my ears are tuned into that noise. I can hear it from just about anywhere in the house. Just a little plink. And when that happens, then I will take off the weight, and I'll let it sit another 10 minutes or so before I take the lid off. And when I take the lid off, I'll let it set another 10 minutes or so, especially if things are still bubbling hard, or if you can still hear any air coming out of a jar. I'll wait, and and then I'll pull them out, and I'll be back and show you when we pull them out of the canner. Welcome back to Wendy's Way. It is time to take our pressure canned chicken out of the canner. I turned the heat off. I let it rest until all the pressure dissipated from the canner and the flapper dropped. And then I let it rest a little longer. Took the weight off. Now I've taken the lid off. Be very, very careful taking the lid off your canner. It is excruciatingly hot. It's not something that I could do while holding a camera, nor did I really want to do it in front of a camera on a tripod. Use hot mitts, lift it and tip it away from yourself a little bit to let some of the heat escape. And then I even go so far as to carry it walking backward toward the sink where I'm going to set it down so that all the heat and the steam are dissipating away from me. Now I'm getting out my jar tool. I've been listening to my jars seal while they're still in the canner because I got busy over on the computer after after they got done. So you want to be very careful. As you can see, boil, 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 and they will continue to boil in the jar for a good long time. I have noticed lately, and I'm not sure why, but on some of them, when they come through the pressure canner, the lids get dark on top. Let's see if I can show you that. The lids get dark. I don't know what that's from. Maybe it's from the vinegar. Maybe it's from the natural fluids from the chicken. I seriously don't know. I can tell you that some of these jars, when I set them down, I can tell that the ring is loose already on it. It has served its purpose. It has held the lid down during the canning process. And I have never had a jar come all the way through a pressure canning and not seal. I've had 100% luck with this. Now this is 7 largemouth quarts full of pressure canned chicken. I will let them sit here on the counter overnight before I do anything with them. If I feel the need, I might wipe them off in the morning, and we will definitely use a full jar at a time for a meal. So I will be removing the rings from the jars before I put them away. Anyhow, here I've got my top lights on again, don't I? Tell you what, lighting is not my friend. I want to say that I sincerely appreciate you joining me here at Wendy's Way. And I know your time is valuable. So every bit of it that you spend with me is very flattering and it's very humbling. I will put all of the instructions that I've given you throughout the video in the description so that you can follow them, and make sure that if you have a pressure canner, if you're using it for the first time, please do read through the instructions thoroughly for that specific canner, because they can be very different for everyone that you use. I also want to say that this is my canning Bible. I love this book. It's the Ball Home Preserving book. And I haven't necessarily used any of the recipes that are in that book, but I follow their directions when it talks about how long to can specific items. That's my primary thing. I'm sure there are a lot of recipes in there that I'll try eventually when I start making different combinations to can. But again, I do appreciate you joining us here at Wendy's Way. This has been our journey in food, pressure canning chicken. May the God who blesses me every day bless you as well, today and always. Amen.